city of Scutari had become the main city of Albania, what's more generally known as the Cairo stuff in his time had played the modernizing game, had relations with European powers, and on one occasion was approached by the Austrians and the Russians with an offer that he would be made king of Albania in perpetuity if he converted to Christianity and fought the Ottomans. He agreed to do this until he learned that the long-term plan was to make Albania a vassal state of Montenegro. Hearing this, he beheaded the European delegation, bringing him the offer, sending the skulls to the port. Suffice to say, more such escapades followed, and soon he too was beheaded, and his skull is apparently still there in a monastery in Montenegro. Proceeding now with the article. We learned, because of the good relations of the Bushatlis and Muhammad Ali, a number of Egyptian ulama worked in Scutari. This is totally new material if you have a technical interest in this. Apparently the family of one such alim still lives there. It's called the Misriya. Another such family is made up of the descendants of Sheikh Ahmed al-Misri. This man had been given an important imam position, lived his life, died 1848, married, children, whatnot, and the family's name now is Raju. The article is vague about Hassan al Attar, except saying he taught in the madrasa of the Old Market. He was taught al-Misri, and he wrote books there. And this poses not only a very interesting set of cultural connections preceding, of course, 1798, but it also has some complexities in terms of how to account for Hassan al Attar's life, because he spent a great deal of time in Turkey, Syria, and Palestine, where he also did a lot of writing and had students and so forth. For me, as I've already indicated, this article raises wide-ranging paradigm questions. I have not previously encountered the idea of the Bushatli model for Muhammad Ali, nor did I know that Muhammad Ali was paying much attention to Albania in 1815 when al Attar returned to Egypt, when, as the article claims, Muhammad Ali singled him out and took his views on things, presumably because of this Albanian connection. Actually, my image of Muhammad Ali is that he was a pragmatist, very keen on power, not someone with fixed loyalties, and the point is made by a lot of books that he got rid of the old Albanians when they were no longer useful to him. So my thought is maybe Hassan al Attar's Albanian connection was useful, but there were other factors involved. The article by Muhammad al-Arnaout in sum puts Muhammad Ali in a long-term continuum going back before 1798 to other fringes of the Ottoman Empire, which were also seeking independence. France is not a part of the subject. It also allows us to understand how the early Nahda culture moved from the level of the individual writer to the bureaucratic level. Hassan al Attar, thanks at least in part to his years in Scutari, became the first cultural official of the modern Egyptian state, the antecedent of today's modern Minister of Culture. Something tells me, however, that if this article, or when this article becomes more widely known, it will encounter resistance, judging at least from another recent publication, which I also want to make reference to, one which makes Muhammad Ali very Turkish. This publication is entitled Remembering One's Roots. Muhammad Ali Pasha's links to the Macedonian town of Kavala, published in Istanbul jointly by the Baja Shahir University and the Muhammad Ali Institute of Kavala, Greece, 2011. It was written by Heath Lowry, the well-known Turkish specialist at Princeton, and a Turkish historian named Ismail Erunsel. And it was dedicated to Enver Yücel, who, quote-unquote, shares Muhammad Ali's passion for education. Enver Yücel, it turns out, is the founder of the aforementioned chain of Baja Shahir colleges, which subsidized the publication. The other co-sponsor, the Muhammad Ali Institute of Kabbalah, turns out to be built upon the Pasha's old house, now a museum, which is said to be the fourth greatest tourist attraction at Kabbalah out of 12 tourist attractions there. All this is kind of off the beat of your mainstream narrative of Egyptian history if this is what you've been reading. But it's interesting. It's interesting for Egypt in a minute. I'll show you in a minute. What this book tells us is that the Pasha lavished money on the town of Kabbalah in the form of buildings, and he gave employment to a substantial number of townspeople who all migrated to Egypt. 7 in Muhammad Ali's immediate family, and 7 of his close childhood friends wound up in high bureaucratic positions. Among the latter was Abdurrahman Semibeg, who served as the director of the cabinet, or Bash Mu'awan, an individual who we know knew Hassan al Attar. less certain is how Sami Bey, who was born in Peloponnesus, became a childhood friend of someone in faraway Kabbalah, or how he knew Al-Attar. There's lots of loose ends. But in any case, what the book seems to be trying to do is to downplay the role of Albania in Muhammad Ali's life and to upgrade that of Kabbalah and of Turkishness, contradicting the book of Afat Lutfi Sayyid al-Marsoud on Muhammad Ali. It claims that the Pasha was not an Albanian, nor were his parents. That if he, Muhammad Ali, commanded Albanians when he came to Egypt, that was more or less an accident. It does not take up the point that Muhammad Ali's first language was Albanian, nor does it reflect on whether just anyone could command a regiment of Albanians. The book as a whole, with its many pictures, seems like one designed for tourists visiting a museum, despite its scholarly facade. Anyway, one could see a Minister of Tourism distributing it. What one, in sum, might conclude from this is that there's some kind of culture war going on as to Muhammad Ali's origins, that nobody has found the relevant documents in the courts in Kabbalah up to now that would clarify the matter, or if they have, they've hidden them. Probably all this affects tourism, and as we know, tourism can drive historiography. Of course, this raises the question where Egypt fits in this Turkey versus Albania culture war. And I don't know the answer to that exactly, but here in Egypt, we do see a lot of conferences with Turkey and nothing at all with Albania. So I don't know if that means anything. If the drift in Egypt is one making Muhammad Ali to be basically Turkish, maybe the Albanian connection of Hassan al Attar works against him in terms of Nahda scholarship. This is a thought. In any case, Al-Attar figures in the early Nahda in a second way, as well as in the field of medicine, and for this he's recognized, but only in a minimal way. The full importance of his contribution remains to be grasped. In the 1820s, 1830s, Muhammad Ali realized he needed a Tarath dimension in his cultural program to legitimate his reforms, and this made Hassan al Attar important for him. In this period, Al-Attar gave speeches praising French medicine while carrying on his study of classical texts, of the sort validating what Muhammad Ali was doing. What Al-Attar did was to blunt the criticism that Muhammad Ali was destroying Islam through his education program. And from what is known, no Egyptian doctor defected at that time to support the Wahhabis or Sunnus in the various wars Muhammad Ali was fighting. And you notice that this was a particular period in the history of modern medicine. Modern medicine in Egypt has, different phases and different orientations, but this was one particular phase. Everyone knows that Al-Attar also taught classical texts to Talal and to others. And among these was a work by Al-Antaki on anatomy. The work was called Nusrat al-Azan fi Islah Abdan, which is meant to sound nice. Al-Antaki was a well-known commentator in the tradition of Ibn Sina. In his commentary on this work, Al-Attar reveals his contact with the opposite tradition, the empirical tradition of the study of anatomy, which he learned in Istanbul. And he also showed his familiarity with the classical texts of Ibn Nafis and of Al-Razi, works which are very critical of the kind of logical deductive approach you get from Aristotle, Ibn Sina, or Antaki. It shows that what Muhammad Ali, what the Al-Attar's book shows, and this is a manuscript in the Rawak and the Magharba and Al-Azhar up to them, it shows that what Muhammad Ali had ordered to be taught was not in opposition to Islam, a point made recently as well by the German student of medical history, Rainer Bremer, who also was studying later anatomy and its study in the Middle East, more from a Turkish point of view, but he covered some of this ground. This is a very interesting sort of break with familiar ideas. The issue of the bureaucratization of modernism in Egypt or period, and Al-Azhar's various official roles in the 1820s and 1830s. To make sense of such matters now, to move to the second part of my paper requires a different approach to cultural history from the one we used to from today's Nahda historiography. And this is now what I want to discuss, proposing that the subject of the early Nahda be looked at more as a part of Egyptian history and not as Nahda history. And here I need to insert another word of clarification. As some may have forgotten, the Nahda, including the early Nahda, for a long time was an organic part of Egyptian history writing, as well as it was Western history writing, as history writing was once practiced in the first half of the 20th century. In recent decades, however, Nahda scholars, perhaps because of the postmodernism, seem to have been left behind, raising the question, were the two to be combined together, that is, cultural history and history, or Nahda history, could we give Nahda studies a new beginning and perhaps overcome some of the ambiguities of Hassan al Attar and others who get marginalized by the Nahda paradigm? And if so, how would this be done? Here I'm assuming, what most other scholars do as well, that the main reason subjects get marginalized or get made the center of attention or construed in the way they do follows directly from the paradigm favored by researchers. It's not a question, here to repeat, of adding more historical facts and stir, which is a point often heard in Middle Eastern studies where you're told the field is underdeveloped, meaning somehow or another you're not supposed to sort of question paradigms, you're supposed to simply collect information. And this is, I don't know, sort of crowd control applied to higher education, sort of keep people from thinking. The dominant paradigm for the study of Nahda, which I'm now sort of referring to, and this is not intended to be an essay of lecture critique, is one associating modernity with Europe, with secular culture, and with 1798 as a takeoff point. In its present Tanwiri incarnation, it has little to say about Torah. If one thinks, however, as a historian might today, that the Nahda should include more than that, or that Europe is more than that, or that 1798 is not that at all, what one has assumed, then one finds oneself in the position that I am in, searching for some way to have this Nahda Tanwiri paradigm widened a bit to include Torah, and then deepened a bit to show the long-term development of the Torah. And for this, it would seem, again, speaking as a historian, one would need to begin one's study of the Nahda not with 1798, but with the Ottoman conquest of 1517, making it the watershed for Nahda studies. 1798 is too late to be the starting point of modernism, too late to be the starting point of capitalism, too late to be the starting point of international connections, and so on. By turning to 1517, I'm of course, to a degree, simply following a bunch of earlier writers who did the same. In particular, I'm thinking of Andrew Hess, Mahmoud Alwaleed, and a whole group of people here called the Ottoman Seminar. The Ottoman conquest, as they recognized some years ago, as various people reckon, should be seen as important in terms of Egypt's entry into the modern world market, as well as Egypt's move towards a mercantilist form of political economy. As Professor Hannah has shown in her most recent book, Egypt was not only a part of the transit trade for spice and coffee, but it produced textiles, and these competed for market share abroad in the era of rising states, with the politics this implies. In other words, international trade at this point in the early modern period has to be looked at as a part of international politics following mercantilism. Egypt, by virtue of its involvement in international trade, was a part of its politics. This being the case, we ought to be able to argue, as a few others are doing, that if modern capitalism from its birth was global but not simply national, so too was modern culture. We also ought to be able to lay down the idea of rupture as a defining feature of modernity, as rupture was only important in a few parts of the world. Indeed, looking at the 16th century closely, what's striking is how efficient the older economic practices have become, being now better institutionalized thanks to the collusion of dominant elements from around the world. It is, in fact, this worldwide collusion which makes modern capitalism more than simply a European phenomenon. As for source material, one need only turn to the studies of mercantilism. Such work makes clear, more so than does most other work in economic history, how the surplus was amassed in those centuries, showing the process of the role of hoarding, plundering, empire building, and of course, collusion among dominant elements. A few of these works go even further, and I think they are cutting edge at this point. In the tradition of the Italian theorist Silvio Federici, They take up the rise of housewifization, that is the unbelievable unwaging of half of the world's workforce, which was one of the main events of the birth of modern capitalism, and that was the single most important event that ever happened to women. This too was we definitely need to pay attention to as well when we talk about modernism, because as we've known for some time in the case of Egypt, that the Ottoman conquest not only led to the annual plunder of a tribute payment, plunder of the skilled artisans, last but not least, the plunder of women. So far, at least, this is not disputed. No one disputes the fact that the conquest affected the status of women more than it did that of men. After 1517, one no longer found women lawgivers, perhaps only a few women religious scholars and teachers. For Egypt and Syria, the last woman lawgiver apparently was Aisha al-Bayuniya, who died in 1517. This is according to an article by the literary scholar Emil Homer. What appears to have taken place in Egypt after that was what we know took place in many other countries. As more money began to circulate and more opportunities to make what knowing Hannah has called big money appeared on the horizon, women's rights to be out and about, to travel and work, was increasingly challenged by male jurisprudence. Historians have, of course, noted these changes, but ascribed them wrongly, I believe, to the patriarchal nature of Ottoman Turkish culture, which was then being imposed on Egypt, and not to the plundering nature of the mercantilist era itself. Historically, Turkish culture, like other cultures, was in fact diverse, if you recall Bektashism. But like Egyptian culture, it too was changing, and on the official level, becoming more male-oriented. Thus, when we find the Ottoman officers taxing marriages and preventing women from going about, we should assume this was new for them too. And assessing these events, certainly historians need to give more weight to the fact that Egyptian women immediately resisted the imposition of some of these changes, doing so in the name of the Sharia and of tradition, and the power structure retreated a bit. However, as our colleague Professor Amir Sambal showed in her research, now over many years, women therefore have to fight an increasingly difficult battle to maintain some semblance of power by writing in shurut in their marriage contracts. This is the era in which women were being burned, hanged, and tortured in some other countries. So there's a parallels have yet to be sort of worked out. But this we know from Dr. Sandal's work. By the 19th century, with a much stronger state in place, this practice of writing in shurut became increasingly considered as shameful, and apparently became less common as well. Thereafter, women had to depend on the goodwill of their husbands to bend laws which, on paper, favored men. One can see from this how someone like Federici, maybe Noel Sadawi, some others, they plunder as opposed to profit to be the basis of modern capitalism, and women to be the main object of plunder. It's an interesting, and this I think the latest twist in the study of how to go about studying mercantilism. Assuming that the function of cultural history was in Egypt was the same as it was everywhere else in the world, all this plunder, however, would be carried over. So when we read that the poetry of Ottoman Egypt emphasized the beauty of nature, perhaps is the inference we should draw. There's a new episode. Why was Egypt beautiful just at this point? Perhaps one should ask, what kind of struggles were lurking in the background behind all this beauty? Something for sure is being left unsaid. The great scholar, Al-Wahhab Sharahani, a witness to some of these changes that came with housewives, spoke with sympathy about the plight of women, according to the work of Michael Winter. And this was centuries before Talal and Qasim said that. So what adjustment exactly would not the study need to make in order to accommodate or adjust to study of history? And I would just summarize them in a sort of schematic way. These would be as follows. Nahda studies would need to emphasize the rise and fall of mercantilism in Egypt, which was between 1517 and 1867, and the influence of this mercantilism on early Nahda cultural production. Second, it would need to deal with the capitalist nation state thereafter, after 1867, and with late Nahda cultural production. As regards the early Nahda, one might note that mercantilism began to decline in Egypt in the period of Ali Kabir. The full period of decline extending for a century from about 1760 to 1860. This 100-year period was marked by the rise of foreign-linked mercantile communities at the expense of local ones. In terms of culture, initially the age of decline was an age in which the literary salons received patronage, an age in which even authors were sometimes patronized. Alsaud was one such example. He wrote the famous Talal. As mercantilism grew weaker and decline was in the air, Zabidi apparently decided to shock his audience with poetry mourning the death of his wife Zubaydah. This certainly needs study. Was what shocked people the public nature of his description of private feelings, that is, along typical 18th century Enlightenment style? Or was the feelings themselves that were shocking? If so, why? If they were shocking, did this something to do with a threat to the existing sexual contract? Again, I think this would be a good thing to look into. To recap then, what is being proposed, I'm suggesting that from the Ottoman conquest forward, the main cultural trend was a slowly developing neoclassical or heritage trend which dominated Nahda at least until the late 19th century, and then carries on to today simply as Torah. How secular or how religious it was at different times, we don't know yet. Mamluk culture, that is before 1517, was clearly never part of the Nahda. According to Robert Irwin, the English literary scholar, Mamluk literature was a mixture of trends, less religious or conservative than what came later, and it produced few what you would call immortal works. But what then about Nahda meaning Renaissance, to go back to the old word? How would we use the word Nahda if we want to mean Renaissance? Clearly, it's too cumbersome to use the term Renaissance to describe the whole body of modern writing as the Nahdawi scholars once did. Today, for Renaissance, one would do better to turn to the literature from the Jahiliyyah through the Abbasid period, to figures such as Abdulaziz or Al-Mutanabbi. Here one finds iconic works, and then begin the discussion of the Nahda with the Tabaqat works of Al-Wahhab al-Sharani or writers of that era. So why al-Sharani? Why? Because it seems logical that under the cultural conditions of foreign occupation and early capitalism in Egypt, some figure of that period would seek out a deeper knowledge of human life earlier to try to resolve the problems of the present, which he did through his biographies. As time went on, the heritage tradition took the form of commentaries and glosses on older texts, and then it kept on evolving through the years of Al-Azhar and beyond. Time being what it is, I'll conclude here by expressing the hope I've made clear that the problems leading to Al-Azhar's life and work being obscured are much wider than those relating to this one individual, but by focusing on him, some of the problems emerge and one can work on them. To that end, I urge that Nahda studies in the future should be tied more closely to history, and were this to happen, figures such as Shaykh Hassan al Attar would emerge from his isolation and perhaps even come to be seen as our contemporary by virtue of trying to modernize language, by grappling with what it means to be bureaucratically modern, and to mobilize heritage for progress, all of which I think are concerns you can find right now. Thank you very much.
We can move the microphone. Any questions? Adam, we can start with you.
Can we start? Sorry. Thanks very much. I enjoyed the talk, and I appreciate the revisionist tendency. But I think this is more comment than a question. I think it's a shame that while you're pushing so hard for a revisionist look at the history of the Nahda, etc., you're still relying on this very outdated, and I would say illegitimate sources for the literary history. I mean, citing sources like Robert Irwin or this recent volume by Roger Allen is actually dismantling the argument, because I think we're very mistaken about the history of Arabic literature post, let's say, 1450. That's just a small comment.
Al-Azhar one. How would you define Nahda then? I mean, how would you propose that we define Nahda or use the term? It is laden with all sorts of connotations and meanings, but How would you propose we use it?
Well, I would prefer it's one that's abandoning the idea of an Orient and Orientalism, and one would sort of go to the other direction and try to sort of say what generally is the meaning that people want from the study of culture. And I think the idea would be the study of cultural modernism or modernism in general. This was never totally absent from the word Nahda, but the word Nahda has often been more related specifically to either Renaissance or borrowing from Europe or emulation in one sense or another, unless the sort of analytic history of the struggles going on in this country, which were defined by this country, and therefore perhaps comparable to a dozen other countries, and more one of measuring up to a particular kind of example. So that would be the direction. That is, I think I would be some post-Orientalist looking for kind of a comparative studies type of thing. In other words, I'd like to validate whatever I said about Egypt by having footnotes from many other countries.
Dr. Salah.
Thank you very much. And I think we very hopeful to talk. And one thing I would like to just inquire about the achievement of the contribution of Muhammad Ali was considered on military level and also on the other things, improvement of the education system, these sort of physical improvements at that time. I think what you are suggesting now is that Muhammad Ali himself participated in building or constructing some sort of concept for progress and for development. So I would like any study to see also what goes in the mind of Muhammad Ali. Was he just a military person or who established certain dynasty in Egypt? So the project of Muhammad Ali was just the physical work for concrete things done in Egypt, or he was also having something in mind. The figure of Hassan al Attar and also the recruitment of Hassan al Attar by Muhammad Ali shows that he was having something in mind and to be able to establish his own project in Egypt.
Well, I think you answer this your question in rather articulately ways there. This is the direction I would be sort of going. Is that it's unfortunate that the kind of research that we've chosen to do about Muhammad Ali, again I'm blaming the Nahda paradigm, covers over the complexity of the period. It's not lack of sources, but it's the questions we ask of the period. Here's how I began. Before I was very far into the Attar material, I was always very concerned with the fact that Abdurrahman Jabarti was a critic of Muhammad Ali. And Muhammad Ali really came to sort of hate him at a certain point. And somebody murdered Jabarti, and no historian has ever investigated that murder. Now, we're talking about a situation where there's a pretty big archive from many different points of view, and we know that not all those bureaucrats liked Muhammad Ali all that much. If it wasn't for the Nahda paradigm, we would be very interested to know, who murdered Jabarti, and what did the government think about it at that time. This is just one thing, but in general, I'm agreeing with what you say. I think that the fact that education is a kind of a dangerous thing. If you take a bunch of young people and say, learn something obscure and foreign, the immediate reaction is going to be that it's going to be upsetting to them. On the other hand, if you say, look, this is part of the history of 1,000 years of this thing, it then becomes a kind of natural part of education. And Attar and Muhammad Ali realized this. And this is why I'm saying they are our contemporaries. I'm stealing an article by Sayyid Yassin, actually at the moment, is what I'm saying. that sense, I think we need.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Gran. I followed your writings and I'm happy to see you here in Cairo and welcome. My name is Sulaiman. I used to be an economist. I am. I want to underline two things that you said that are very interesting. One is that the Nahda should begin much earlier. And many people consider the French invasion to have been the catalyst for the Nahda. While your narrative and other people's also will talk about the trade and the commerce of Egypt in the earlier centuries was a very important kind of, for example, the textile trade, as you mentioned. I know that Hannah has done some work on this, but also the coffee trade, which we seem to have forgotten because coffee was discovered much later than the spice trade. So I think the economic aspect of Egypt as a international player is an important aspect, and unfortunately not very many people study this aspect. The second point I would like to make, and I think I'm happy that you mentioned geography, because if Al-Attar was a person who went outside Egypt and maybe exposed to other European influences, geography was a wholly variety. And some people consider it to be such a unique phenomenon. And you don't look like maybe there were other geographies that we don't know about. So it's very important to see why a person of that nature, a very comprehensive intellectual, will come out of Egypt without international.
This is correct. One of the problems with the Nahda paradigms I can't explain Zabidi or really Al-Attar or Jabarti or even Ismail Kashyap or the science of El-Damanhuri, among some of them. And so each time a writer is confronted with this, what they say is a genius in the dark age. So during my lifetime, we've increased the number of geniuses in the dark age because we haven't changed the paradigm. If we changed the paradigm, we wouldn't need so many geniuses. They would just be intellectuals who basically, we assume they had contact with the world. If it was in Arabic or whatever. We assume you don't have to go to France. But anyway, you have to sort of agree with me that the way of interpretation is very frozen, and economics does not play the kind of role it should play that it would play if it was, say, Spain or Italy or Mexico. And I don't know why that is. In other words, none of the well-known economists in Egypt ever told historians that they were fools. I mean, that would be so nice, that because, economic history is economists have played a huge role. All right. Sideboards.
We have time for one final question. If anybody has a final question.
Can we add Al-Qasimi also to this group, Al-Qasimi? Because he mentioned certain ideas which went away from
Which Qasimi is this?
Al-Qasimi of Tafsir.
I say. Well, I'm not familiar with it. There's, of course, many 18th century figures. I think that the work of the biography of Zabidi, the German Reichswood, opens the door to a consideration of a very, very large number of people in just the 18th century. The relationship of the period that Dr. Hannah studied, the 17th century, the 18th century, we have not really done very good work on. And the immediate reaction to the 16th century watershed, we haven't done good work on. But there's this one new book, by an unfamiliar name, Ahmed Hijazi, on the poetry of Ottoman Egypt. And this is our first sustained cultural study based on the man finding some 30 diwan thereabouts in the manuscript form and reading them. And he's the one who comes to the idea that mainly the poetry he was reading has to do with the beauty of the landscape of Egypt of this period. But at least this is the first beginning Now we can start to sort of look and see what was going on in some of the other countries. Did they have landscape poetry? I think they probably did, but slowly we escaped from this kind of oriental, whatever you would call it.
Rules of doing oriental.
No, I'm listening to you to see if we've used up the time.
Oh, okay, you want the difference. You want the difference, okay. So thank you very much. Thank you all for coming up this afternoon, and thank you, Professor.